Isn't it good to be in the presence of the Lord? Let's just sit down and first of all, I'd like to apologize. We're starting about a little bit late, but part of me saying we're not late at all because we welcome the King to be here with us. So it is good to have the Lord here with us. And let's start with a word of prayer this afternoon. Abba, we just invite your Spirit to be in this place today, Lord, as you gave us so many revelations yesterday and on Friday. Abba, we ask that today will be a day that is filled with your revelations. So we ask, Abba, that you impart on us your knowledge and understanding of who you are and who your Son Yeshua is. And Lord, we ask for your glory to be in this place. In the name of Yeshua. Amen. Out of curiosity, any new faces that were not here yesterday or the day before? So we have quite a few, just let me say, count new faces. New faces. Well, where were you yesterday, new faces? Well, we are so happy you are with us today. So I'm Rabbi Shapira, and I'm the author of The Return of the Kosher Pig and the founder of Ahavat Ami Ministries. And we have been going through quite a journey. Not just this weekend, but I think I was here in March, where we started to put together the case and the portrait of the Messiah, and specifically look at the divinity of the Messiah through Jewish eyes. And we started on March, first of all, defining Jewish apologetics as a whole and looking how Jews are actually even look and read and treat the Hebrew Bible. So we walked through a complete framework, understanding of Jewish framework, and then we looked at the dilemma with the case of the divinity of the Messiah. And to remind you, we looked at different, I like to call those case studies. One of the case studies that we looked at last couple of months ago was Isaiah. And another case study that we looked at was Zechariah 6 months ago. Then we kind of shift gear in this visit that I'm here, and we looked at Moses, and we call that we look at three premises of understanding prophecies through Jewish eyes. Well, just to really quickly recap for those who were not here yesterday and those who are watching online who might have not caught the earlier presentation, we said what? Let's see if anybody remember. Number one, we established that all the words of the prophets, right, have to be what? True. Every word of prophecy in the Hebrew Bible has to be fulfilled. That's number one in understanding prophecies. Number two, when we look at prophecies, remember this expression from Ecclesiastes Rabbah, chapter 1, verse 9, what happened will happen again. When we study prophecies, we have to study prophecies not in vacuum, not in silos, but look at prophecies as a cycle. Right? Everything is a cycle. An example, we looked yesterday at the life of Moses as parallel to the life of the one that will come after Moses, who is even greater than Moses, the Messiah himself. And thirdly, we look at the third principle as a reminder. Sanhedrin 99a is a tractate in the Talmud that says that all the words of the prophets that of all good things for what? For the days of who? Of the Messiah. Everything in the Hebrew Bible is geared toward one thing and one thing only, to identify for us and to prove to us and to show us and to give us signs about the Messiah. Now, it's also important because we look at Moses, and remember it says that there was no greater prophet in Israel than Moses, right? It says in Deuteronomy chapter 34. There's no greater prophet in Israel than Moses. So when we looked at Moses' prophecy yesterday, Moses gave us a certain signs about the fact that the Messiah will be rejected and despised. The Messiah will have to do great miracles. Greater than him, the Messiah will have to resurrect the dead. The Messiah, if you remember, we'll look at three things. The Messiah is called the donkey rider. The reason the Messiah called the donkey rider because Abraham didn't ride the donkey on the binding of Isaac. Moses didn't ride the donkey either. The Messiah, who is called lonely and riding upon a donkey, Zechariah 9:9, he's the only one who can ride a donkey. What's the big deal about donkey? Well, yesterday we learned that donkey is a representation of what? Anybody remember? Satan is riding upon Satan because he is the only one who can defeat evil once and for all. Nobody else can defeat evil except the Messiah himself, because the Messiah have no struggle inside of him. In most of us, there is a good inclination and evil inclination. Only in the Messiah, there is only good inclination. We also saw that Moses prayed and bread come from heaven. But who was the giver of the bread? It was God himself. Well, what's a come from heaven in rabbinic literature is called the matar. And we actually, the Torah portion this week, talk about the bringing of the matar, that God is going to bring the rain. And there are two rains, we talk about them. One was named the Yoreh, which means to come near God. And the other one, the one that kind of stop everything, called the Malkosh, which means the circumcision of your hard heart. When the hard heart hits, then this rain stops, right? So we look at this, but at the end of the day, God said in the scripture, actually interesting, in this Torah portion, this Shabbat, Parashat Ekev, very interesting, he says that he will be the one who will water this garden, this land of milk, and he will be the one who's doing it, right? There's a principle, it's important Hasidic principle, first of all, what coming out from heaven down to earth. Start thinking about Sodom and Gomorrah and as an example, and then Moses prayed and God brought the manna down from heaven down to earth, and then Yeshua says, I am the bread of life that comes from heaven. See, Moses prayed, but God brought it, but Yeshua said, no, you don't understand. I am it. I am the reason. You can come to this. You can receive the bread, and remember what bread represents. Bread represents resurrection. So Yeshua established himself greater than Moses, because Moses prayed and God gave it. He said, no, I am the Lord of the resurrection. Right? It's interesting because there is a prayer when we close the Torah. Right? When we close the Torah every Shabbat, we say, Chayei olam nata betochenu. Everlasting life you planted in us. Who is the one who planted in us everlasting life? It's the Lord. Because the last line of the prayer, when we close the Torah, I said, Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah. Blessed are you, O King of the universe, who has granted us, who has given us the Torah. You are the one who holder the seed, this spark, this DNA, God is, who is life itself. Well, Yeshua stood up in the book of Yohanan, in the book of John, in the 5th chapter, and he said, you refuse to believe in me because in through me you receive a life. And then he said, I come to give you life in greater abundance. And in the same chapter, Yeshua also used the other term, Chayei Olam, everlasting life. What is the difference between life and everlasting life? There is a big difference. When God says in the scripture, and you will notice a lot in the Torah, and those of you who don't know what the Torah is, the 5 books of Moses, you will notice God says, if you do this, and that you may live. Right? You see this mentioned a lot of time. What does it mean when he says that you may live? When he says that you may live, it does not speak of the salvation. Never, never, never. The word chaim or chai mean that you will thrive and prosper in this world. Okay? The interesting thing, the very first thing Yeshua mentioned is Chaim. Not salvation, but Chaim. He says, anybody who wants to come to me will live. You want to know in Yeshua? If you thrive, and thriving and prosperity are not the same thing, by the way. Thriving means excelling. Thriving means being the leading, being the head, like we are about to have in September 4, 27, something around there. Rosh Hashanah, when we bless the Lord and eat the head of the fish. May will be the head and we will not be the tail. Right? So that's what we should. So the interesting thing with the message of Yeshua is, whoever believes in me going to thrive in this world. And then a few verses later he said, whoever believes in me not going to only thrive, he's going to have Chayei Olam. Which means he's going to always be taken care of in the world to come. But isn't it reassuring to know that Yeshua's message to us was not just about the world to come? Because sometimes we're so heavenly minded and we just think about the world to come. But Yeshua's message was completely different. He said, I not just care about the world to come, I care about this world right now. I want you to be successful and to thrive in this world that you live in today. Because remember, this world that we live in today is a rehearsal to the world to come that is in heaven. Now, I got a little bit off the tangent, but since there were so many new faces, I wanted to just to give it back to level settings. So in the eyes of Yeshua, at least, because really what we're doing here, we're not judging Yeshua, but we are having a case here to see if his claims are really outside Moses. And why Moses? Because Moses is the baseline for everything. Yeshua himself says, if you believe Moses, if you read Moses and believe Moses, you would know about me. So we looked through that yesterday. So the litmus test for everything has to be the Torah and Moses as a starting point. Yeshua held the thought in his mind that he is the holder of the DNA, the breath that we live now. He is the holder of this, or even the breath that we live now. Now the Torah, and not just the Torah, I should say, but the Torah, as an example, Deuteronomy 17:3, a very famous verse. God says, you are never, ever, ever to bow down to an image. You are never to bow down to an image. You're never to worship any image whatsoever. You are never to have more than one Lord. God started in the 10 Commandments, the 10 words. He says, I am the Lord your God. You will have no other gods except me. Interestingly enough, Yeshua himself said very similar thing. In Matthew 6, Yeshua himself said, no one can serve two masters. Either will hate the one and love the other, or you're devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and Mammon. Okay, now he used the example of God and Mammon, but we have to understand that Yeshua uses a very interesting type of argumentation. This type of argumentation have a name. It's called Kal v'chomer, okay? Or sometimes Kal v'chamur. The word Kal in Hebrew means easy, and chomer mean, or chamur, it's chet mem resh. That's, by the way, where we get the word donkey for, too. That's the same root for the word donkey, chamur. But chomer, or chamur, mean heavy. So he uses an example, and you see Yeshua uses these arguments a lot. Also, Apostle Paul used this argument a lot. He gives us an example of light, and from light to heavy, to bring a generalization for a principle that he wants us to follow. Because one can read and say, Yeshua just said basically, don't love money more than you love God. Right? That is not exactly Yeshua's point. That is not the point of Yeshua. Yeshua's point, he uses it as he said, this is the least of your problem, to bring a much broader and greater point. Again, referring back to the Torah. In the Torah, you see this, and I will give you a passage that I want you to consider. It's talking about, in the context, I'm not going to read it all to you, but it's talking about the Samaritans, okay? It is in 2 King, if you want to make a note to yourself, in 2 King, the 17th chapters, okay? And it says there, In the very end, it's talking about the Samaritan. Now, did the Samaritan worship the God of Israel? Did they? By the way, just so those of you who do not know the rules of the yeshiva, let me just make one point clear, because there's some new faces. It's interactive in nature, so if you have question, we will bring you the microphone to ask. You can just raise your hand with any comment or question that you have throughout this afternoon, okay? But I will be the first to ask the question, and then you guys can ask. Where the Samaritan, don't worry, I forgot the water gun in the hotel today, so where the Samaritan...
They did, but not where God wanted them to.
Yeah, please have the mic ready. So you say, I will recap it to those who watch online. You said that the Samaritan did worship the God of Israel. Well, in reality, the answer is yes and also no. Here is what the interesting passage says in 2 Kings. Let me read it to you. It says, so the nations feared Yud Hey Vav Hey. Okay? So they feared Adonai. Okay? We don't need the microphone right now. Just have it ready for it.
Gotcha.
And they feared Adonai. This is 2 Kings 17, verse 41. They feared Adonai and served at the same time. At the same time, they feared Yud Hey Vav Hey, and they served their graven images. The children did it likewise. And their children did their father so that they were unto these days. What is the upshot of this verse? This is a very important verse. They knew the God of Israel while they were worshiping. At the same time of knowing the God of Israel, they were worshiping other gods. This type of activity is considered the unpardonable sin in Judaism. This is a very serious issue. I would say it's the most serious issue in Judaism. And if there is one thing that is unpardonable sin in Judaism, is to take any image, even if you recognize the God of Israel, and also devote your attention to it at the same time. Okay? So when Yeshua said, you cannot serve two masters, do not serve two masters, God and Mammon, or love of Mammon. He's give us a generic concept here. It's called avodah zarah, or idol worshipping, or sometimes it's called kfira, a kofar. And a definition of a kofar, or a kofar to be accurate, is somebody who gives his devotion. He can know God. But if he gives his devotion to anybody except God, then he is a kofar. And the Talmud says this, the kofrim have no place in the world to come. And actually, in Corinthians, it's also say this. Very interestingly enough, Paul said that the kofrim have no place in the world to come. And the issue of kfirah is so serious that is equivalent, a person who is kofar, who does not give the full attention to God, it is as he says that there is no God at all. King David says it like this in Psalm 14. He says, for a little a psalm of David, a fool says in his heart, there is no God. The word there for fool is the modern word that we use, nevel, is the modern word that is used for an animal that is dead on the road, what we call roadkill. Yes? If you give your attention, let me put it in English terms. If you give your attention to any entity except to the God of Israel, it is as you say that there is no God at all. That's what David says. And why this is a serious issue for us today is because if we make Yeshua And we give Yeshua the devotion. And God says, give me the devotion. But somehow we give the devotion both to Yeshua and to God. And Yeshua and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh are not the same thing. Then guess what? We got trouble. We got, well, I think trouble is an understatement. Not only that we have got trouble, we have had, we broke the foundation, the very, very basic foundation of God says for us not to do. There was a man by the name of Paul Isaac Ershon, and he recapped it like that. He wrote a book called The Treasure of the Talmud, and he recapped it as such. And I love the way he recapped it. The strictly Orthodox Jew, when invited to a public dinner prepared by Christian, generally has his food prepared to him by a Jewish cook. The wine is also brought from the cellar for this occasion. And should the glass of wine be touched even by the finger of the little finger touched by the Christian, even by the queen herself, the one become unlawful. And upon no account the Jew would drink it. Are Christianity and idolatry one in the same? Yes, the Jew would reply. For Yeshua was but a man, and Christians worship him as God. Not to say that Christians do not understand that there is a God. They worship him as God. Because the scripture says, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And yet the Orthodox Jew believe, true, he would never admit it, that there is more than one person in the unity, in the compound unity of God. This, friends, is the heart of the issue that we have to establish. God says in the text, again, the baseline. So I want to explain to you why people think that the Return of the Kosher Pig is a book just for Jews. It's not a book for just Jews. It's a book to anybody who holds Yeshua as divine. Because if Yeshua, and I'm telling you now because some people start to play around with this, so let me make it simple. If Yeshua does not hold the full authority of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, then guess what he is? What do you think he is? What? He is the greatest Jewish fraud that ever exists. And what does it make those who follow him? Idol worshippers. And how Jews view Christians today, anybody who follow Messianic Jew, Christian, I'll lump them all together, as idol worshipper. This is a serious issue that we have to resolve, not from the New Testament, but we have to resolve it from the Torah, the prophets, the writings, etc., etc. If we cannot defend this position, then we are ourselves have taken of the worst form of idol worshipping. I want you to understand why this topic is so serious. Because it's the core of the faith. It was the core of the faith 2,000 years ago. When Yeshua, you make yourself to be gods. We're going to stone you. In Matthew chapter 9, they say, you are a blasphemer, Yeshua. As they start ripping their clothes, they use the term megadefu shem shamayim. There is nothing can be any worse than a blasphemer. A blasphemer have no place in the world to come. And if he is our Lord and Master and he is a blasphemer, what does it make us? This is indeed a serious issue. And in order to understand it further, I would like to take you even further to the Torah to show you what God himself says about his nature so that we can try to reconcile it. Because I do believe Yeshua was the divine, the Jewish Messiah. But how do we reconcile it is the question. It's a hard question. And by the way, when you talk to Jewish people, you will recognize that this is the core issue at the end of the day. Not if Yeshua can or can't be the Messiah, is the issue of the divinity. Because the premise of God in Exodus 20 on Mount Sinai, I am it. It says in Isaiah, I am the Aleph, I am the Tav. There is nothing except me. As FYI, even it says there in Isaiah 45, verse 7 and 8, I am the creator of light, I am the creator of darkness, I am the creator of good, I am the creator of evil. The view of Satan in Judaism is quite different than the view of Satan, for example, in Christianity. It would be even idolatry to think that Satan can operate independently without God. Most of you have been raised up and trained to believe that Satan can go and do whatever he chooses to do. Oh, this is not true. This is not true. All what one have to do is to go to the book of Job and read the book of Job, where Satan has to ask God permission to test Job. If God is not a sovereign God, then we have an even bigger problem. So before we give Satan too much credit, we must always reconsider this type of things. Satan cannot operate. The idea that God can be put into a box and says he start here and that's where his dominion is idolatrous idea in its core. So the idea that God can take a form of a man is the absolute insane idea. Maimonides says in his principle, and I hope everybody will be here in 6 p.m. today for the feature for presentations. But Maimonides says God can never and will never take a form of a man. There is nothing physical who apply to God. Well, let us look what God says, because instead of talking, and this is a very difficult language for Jewish people to understand. Instead of saying that the Messiah is God or not, the way we are to approach it is by looking at the attributes. I like this word midah, the attributes of the Messiah. Did he have the attribute to forgive sin? Did he have as an example, one of the things we're going to look today at is his dominion. That's the entire lesson today. Will the Messiah be worshipped? Because that's going to be a big problem if he's going to be worshipped, right? Because only God is to be worshipped. Are you following what I'm saying? So instead of using this kind of language, is God or not, let us broaden our language. Contextual language is really important at times. Using a language that is palatable when we present the good news. Let us see what God says again. What should be our baseline? Absolutely. The baseline has to be the Torah. So let us see what it says there. We're going to look at this lesson, and I hope this was a great recap for you and understand how serious the allegations are here. Those are serious allegations. And if we cannot resolve this issue, not only Yeshua is the greatest fraud, we are the greatest fraud. And the burden of proof is upon us, friends. In the Torah, right there again, what should be the pinnacle for everything that they do? Mount Sinai. So let us turn for a moment from Mount Sinai and look at the scripture in Mount Sinai. It says this, I am the Lord, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. There shall be no other gods before me. God is make this point very, very clear. And then it's continuing. If you want to make a note for yourself, he uses similar language in Exodus 20, verse 5, Exodus 34, 14, Deuteronomy 4:24, Deuteronomy 5:8, Deuteronomy 6:15. And then God continued on and said the following word. He said, you should not bow down to them. God does not say only not to worship any other God. Don't bow down to them. And then he used the word, do not serve them. I want you to pay attention to the word serve. That's an important quote. For I am the Lord thy God, and I am known by the name, I am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children, upon the third, upon the fourth generation of them that hate me. God referred to himself as jealous God. Okay, now the interesting about the word jealous, when you think about the word jealous, do you feel, is it a positive word or a negative word? What? It can be both. Okay, in English, you have two words. You have the word jealous, and they have the word zealous. Jealousy and zeal are not the same in English. Interestingly enough, in Hebrew, the word jealous and the word zeal is the exactly same word. Make a note to yourself. The word jealousy and the word zeal, it's the same Hebrew word, and the word is kaneh. Kaneh. K-A-N-E-H. And God referred to himself 5 times in the Torah. He's calling himself Kaneh. I am Kaneh, 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 Kaneh. And the best way to understand the term Kaneh, because that is his nature, is to think about a husband and a wife. Where the husband is madly in love with the wife, and then the wife go and have an affair. That is the best way that I can explain to you the word kaneh. And God's principle here, when he say you are not to serve them, you are not to bow down to him because I'm jealous God, he says, I will not share my dominion. I will not share my authority. I will never, never, never share my glory with anybody else. Never share the glory. Isn't it interesting that I think we looked at Zechariah, that when the Messiah comes, what the Zohar says, that he will take his crown. God will take his crown that he wore when he parted the Red Sea, and he will put it, that's Psalm 21, and he will put it on the it's called the tiara. The word there in Psalm 21 is the word tiara, ateret paz, tiara of gold, and he will put it on the head of the Messiah. The rabbis tell us the same crown he wore when he parted the Red Sea will put on the head of the Messiah when he's going to come to set his foot on Mount Olives. Isn't that interesting? But God's point here is very clear. He will not share his dominion. He will not share his authority. He will not share glory with any entity. The premise that there is another deity, that another object, another image is going against what he told us in Mount Sinai. The key word here in this entire verse is the word avodah. He says, you shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. The word serving, equivalent to the Hebrew word avodah. Now, what the word avodah sounds like? What do you think the root word of the word avodah? Eved. Eved. What is an eved? Eved, we sing in Passover. Avadim ahinu avadim. Ata b'nei chorim. You never heard this song? Okay, I'll help you. Eved mean literally slave. Literally, the word eved in its purest form means slave. Worship. God say you are not only to work them, you are never to worship any other God. It's interesting that Apostle Paul, in all of his epistle, start his letters. How does he start the letter? Eved, yeah, and what is the word for bond servant? Eved Yeshua HaMashiach. The slave of Yeshua HaMashiach. He starts with those words, slave of Yeshua HaMashiach. So the interesting thing here is the word avodah. Because God said you are never to worship, never to serve, you are never to work other God. Isn't it interesting that we read in the Torah portion this Shabbat, what God require of you? Question mark. And then what's the next line says? That's Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 10:12. But to fear him. And then it says avodah. It uses the word avodah. Avdu oto, in fear. To work him, to serve him, to worship him. So there is a positive commandment and there's a negative commandment. The negative commandment says you are never to worship any God. And by the way, this should be a lesson to us today. A God to us can be anything. Remember we looked at Noah and the Nephilim yesterday? We can worship anything. We can worship our husbands, or our wives, or our jobs, or our children, or our career, or whatever it is. For God, Yeshua says this is Kal Vachomer. This is all fall in the same category. Sometimes we think this is better and this is worse, but God says no. All the commandments are as one commandment. It's all fall under idol worship. Are you with me so far? In essence, God is saying here in this passage in Exodus, when you say you are not to worship any other God, you're not to serve that, it's coming back to the idea, and the best way to think about this again is a husband and a wife. Okay? He's saying that he wants his wife, he's the husband, to be absolutely adoring him, obsessed with him all day long. That's what he's saying. Sound like a nagging relationship, but that's really what God wants. He wanted to be daily, right? You're going to see this kind of repetition, everything repetition. People don't understand. They think repetition is legalism. Repetition and legalism is not the same thing. Now, if your heart is empty, repetition can be legalism. But if your heart is filled with the kavanah toward him, your repetition is exactly what he wants. What he says, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And then what the next line says, and you shall teach them diligently into your children. The word there, diligently. Veshinantam. Shinantam, from the tongue of the word shen. Say my name so many times a day until your tooth break. Yeah? Veshinantam. You are recite me so many times. The word shinantam is rooted in the word shen. Say my name so many times a day that you are obsessed with me. You know, we talk about people being demon possessed. But really God's saying, I want you to be possessed by me. I want to be God possessed. Teach and diligently unto your children, and you will do this when you sit in your house, and you walk in the way, when you lie down, and we rest up. Well, is that cover pretty much everything? There is a principle here. What I'm trying to explain to you here, because I want it to be also something applicational, idolatry and avodah zarah and kfirah is not just us, acknowledging other gods, but really it's something much deeper and bigger. It's us compartmentalizing God. God, I will give you from 7 a.m. in the morning till 7:32 in the morning, and then I'm going to get into my car, and then I'm going to listen to my secular music, and then I'm going to come, I'm a good believer again, 6:01 to 6:22, I'm reading my Bible. But 6:23, come on, I'm going to watch this R-rated movie now. You know what I'm talking about now. Don't play like you play dumb with me. You know what I am talking about. Kfirah is not just giving attention to God in a minimal way, but it is also in compartmentalization. And the entire Shema is about the fact that God says, I will absolutely will not tolerate compartmentalization. That's why Yeshua himself says that. He says you are to pick up the cross once in your life and be done with. No, it is a daily thing. We must, I'm sorry I'm kind of deviating a little bit from the topic of the divinity, but I think it's important. We must get out of the mode of thinking I am saved and that's good enough. That is the worst enemy that the believer has, to think that you are okay. It says that Abraham was 120 years old. He was growing in the Lord. He was still growing. So yeah, you could be saved 30 years ago, but you stopped growing 29 years ago. You follow what I'm saying to you? It is not just an issue of us saying I'm saved and that's what it is. That is one of the greatest sins of the church. Trying to present the gospel like it's a ticket. Am I in or am I out? It is not this. It is just not it. We are a work in progress, and we have to continue to strive to it. That's part of this covenantal relationship that God said. You are to worship me, you are to acknowledge me. And by the way, why do you think Yeshua says that when you are to go to the Father, what you are to do? He said, close your door. Close your door behind. There is this idea in Judaism that goes like that. The more you focus on God, the more He focuses on you. Wow. Okay? And think about it, it makes sense. I like to put everything in terms of the marriage. Sometimes I talk to my wife, and she's talking to me, and I don't know what's come over me. I get this glazed look in my eyes. Those of you who have been married know what I'm talking about. It's just go in one ear and go to another ear. And let me tell you, that's really irritating her. It's such, I don't know, some heaviness fall on me sometimes. I don't, it's a spiritual thing. But those of you who've been married, you know about those heaviness time. And your spouse never respond well for those type of things, right? The same is true about our relationship with God. God saying, I want you to work me. Work. The word is avodah. And the word avodah means what? It's something you do routinely. I'm very thankful for Sunday, but how many of us have to go work tomorrow, Monday morning? Woohoo. Is work routine? It is routine. God says, I want you to have me as part of your routine. You have your cereal in the morning, you have your breakfast in the morning, and you have me in the morning. Then are you having lunch again? It's a routine. Have me in lunch. Have me in dinner. I'm telling you, if you go throughout your life with this mode of operation and the relationship with the Lord, I am telling you, your relationship with God will transform and change dramatically. And this is what God desires more than anything else. That is the core of the giving of the Torah. Do you realize that this is the core of giving the Torah? Make yourself a note when you have some time. Go and study Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 6. In this particular verse, God says why He gave us the entire Torah in one verse. He says, I have given you this Torah that your heart may be circumcised. So He's saying all of those commandments that He's a jealous God, jealous God. He doesn't say that because He's an angry and mean God. He doesn't talk about zeal because he's we think about the God of the Old Testament. No, He's saying those things because He wants our hearts to be soft. And why does He want our heart to be soft? So that He can build the tabernacle inside us. He can dwell inside of us. Right? The Malkosh is the heart. It's when the heart is hardened. And when the heart is hardened, there is no more rain. So God, entire plan, even in this thing, is to bring intimacy between us and Him. And it's important to us to recognize that that's the entire goal of the Torah. That's why a lot of people say we exercise Torah, but their heart is so hardened toward people and toward God. Well, it's not the right Torah. It's a man-made Torah. It's not the Lord Torah. Okay? So, what I want to do now, and I hope this is kind of give us, I know we kind of derailed, but I think it was really important, but I think we understand now what God says that His entity look like. He is completely zealous. He is completely jealous. If we compartmentalize Him, if we don't give Him the time to, all of those things are considered avodah zarah, idol worship. All of those things are what we call kfirah, idolatry. So now, I want to kind of shift gear for a second and ask the question, how many of you believe? Remember, there are a few principles that we abide with, and one of the principles we have to abide with is Maimonides' sixth principle, who says, I believe, repeat after me, I believe in perfect faith, that all the word of the prophets are true. Do we believe that the words of the prophets are true? Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to shift, now that we understand what the Torah discusses, I want to shift and see what Daniel says. And there are two options on the table. Option number one, that we're going to find a total agreement between Daniel and the Torah. Option number two is that we will find distinction between Daniel and the Torah. Now, is it possible that we'll go and find distinction between Daniel and the Torah? Really? The differentiation, not distinction is not the right word. Contradiction, excuse me. Contradiction. Is it a possibility for us to have a contradiction between Daniel and the Torah? If Daniel is a true prophet, then the answer is absolutely not. You are correct. Let us turn to Daniel chapter 7, which will be our main text for this afternoon. And let us look there. It says there in the text, let's read it together. It says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, they came with clouds of heaven, one like unto a son of man. And he came even to the Ancients of Days. And he was brought near before him, and there was given to him the dominion and the glory and a kingdom, that all the people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom, that which shall not be destroyed. First thing I want to remind you is a rule of understanding prophecies. Daniel just received a snapshot. He doesn't give us a time frame. He doesn't give us a context. He just received a vision. That's all what we have here, a vision from Daniel. And in these verses in Daniel that we are seeing here, okay, there are a few questions that we always have to ask ourselves. In any kind of prophecies, number one, are those verses messianic verses? Okay, just because a prophet prophesies, it doesn't mean that it has to be a messianic verses. Question number one, are those messianic verses? Well, we're going to try to answer it, okay? And I told you that before, that in different eras of Judaism, different verses are read in different ways. So in the time of the Talmud, the 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, those verses were clearly a messianic verses. However, today in modern Judaism, those verses are not considered messianic at all, shockingly. It's important that we study through rabbinic literature, we are not just picking one point in time, but we're looking kind of cross-sections. If you remember, there are different times, the Tanaic era of the 1st and 2nd century, the Amoraic era of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. We have the Geonim era, and then we have the time of Rambam, Rashi, and later on. So it's always important that we look at the prophecy and commentaries of prophecies across a spectrum of time and not just through one commentator. And of course, the literal text has to be what is guiding us. Now, in the literal text here, he says that there are two entities. There are two entities according to what we call the pshat, the literal meaning of the text. One of them is called in the text here, as you will notice in verse 13, is called the Son of Man. Make yourself, first of all, a note that the term Son of Man is a generic term in rabbinical language to the Messiah. Son of Man is the term that can mean two things. It can mean human being, Son of Man, or Ben Adam. Ben Adam, or here it's used the term because it's in Aramaic, Var Enosh. There are two terms, Ben Adam and Bar Enosh. Okay? Ben Adam literally means son of dirt. So if you call somebody dirt ball, it's not a bad thing. Son of that because God raised it up. And isn't it beautiful that God says in Psalm 8, what is Son of Man that you are so mindful of him? God has taken dirt and he raised it to be slightly below who? No. You got to learn Hebrew. We got to get this Hebrew business. Do you know about Shuvu? You really need to learn Hebrew. It doesn't say below the angels. That's one of the worst translations in the Bible. It says slightly below him. Because in Judaism, we are higher than the angels. The text says we are slightly below God, not below the angels. FYI. The second term that is used to describe the Messiah or a human being is the term Var Enash. The word Enash is somebody who is dying. Okay? He is on a deathbed. He is literally on a deathbed and there is no cure for him. Isn't it amazing to know that God takes something that is incurable and he raised it up to be just slightly below him? What an amazing God we serve. He took something incurable and he cured it. So the term here that is used, the very first entity that is used is called, he is the Son of Man, and write the term the Messiah next to it. I'm yet to prove to you that it is the Messiah, because those two verses are some of the most shocking verses in the Hebrew Bible. And by the way, the book of Daniel as a whole is what's called the sealed book. It's a book that is really not read in synagogues. The book of Daniel is not even read. And then it says, and he even came, so the Son of Man is coming up to another entity, and the other entity is called Ancient of Days, or in Hebrew, if you want the Hebrew, it is called Atik Yamin, Ancient of Days, Atik Yamin. First of all, the first question I want to ask, is this a messianic verse? Yes, because it's mentioned the Son of Man. Son of Man is one of the nicknames of Messiah. Rashi, and those who do not know who Rashi is, he's our greatest, perhaps our greatest commentator on the Hebrew Bible through the literal and through the Talmud. He wrote a commentary even upon the Mishnah. Rashi make a distinction between Ancient of Days and Son of Man. And here is what he says. He said, one like a man was coming. And who is he? This is, he says, King Messiah. And where he came up to, he coming up to the Ancient of Days, who was sitting in judgment, and he's judging the nations. So Rashi is telling us shockingly that it is a picture of Hashem, Yudhei Vavei, who is sitting in the heavenlies. And there is an entity who is coming all the way to the heavenlies. And who it is the Messiah. Now, notice that I told you that the term Var Enosh means human being. But it doesn't say that he is human being. Pay close attention to the language. It's actually have the Hebrew letter Chaf, and I wish I had the little, is there any way, Rabbi Scott, to get this laser thing? This thing doesn't. What do you mean laser on it? Can I point? Is that the same thing that go with the fairy dust? Yes. It was a private joke. A button says laser.
Button that says
How many Jews does it take to work a remote? Yeah?
the problem is when you're putting it on the screen.
Uh-huh.
It's there.
It's there? I cannot see it. Okay.
Barely see it.
All right.
Point, but it's the top.
You know what they say.
Button.
Yeah.
No, not there.
As I always say,
Right
juice and tools do not mix.
This button right here.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, you cannot see that though. It's no good. Okay, but I'm sorry. Juice and tools. But the point is that it used the term Kevar Enosh, as Son of Man. He is going to be masquerade himself as a human being. He doesn't say that he is a human being. Pay close attention. Kevar Enosh. Are you following what I'm saying? This is very important. You understand?
Yeah.
The one Hebrew letter makes a big difference here. Kevar Enosh. He doesn't say that the Messiah will be a regular human. He will appear in the world as a human being. The other question that we still need to answer, that is an interesting question. Wait, if God sits on the judgment throne in the heavens, what kind of a human being can come all the way to the judgment thrones? Do you know any human like that? That can come all the way to the judgment throne? Why does it say, this is question number 2, why does it say that he is going to come up to the judgment throne? It's a good question to ask. Metzudot David, it's a great commentary. It's a commentary on the entire Bible, one of our really well-respected commentaries, rabbinic commentaries. And here's what it says. It says the following on Daniel 7:13. It says in Metzudot, Daniel saw in his vision the one who comes in the clouds of heaven, in the image of the Son of Man. This is a remez, and if you remember what is a remez, this is one of the 4 layers of understanding Jewish hermeneutics. You have the pshat, the literal. He doesn't say in the pshat Messiah, but he's saying it is a remez, which is a second level of hermeneutics. This is a remez for King Mashiach. Metzudot David tell us the same thing that is Rashi tell us, that without a shadow of a doubt, it is applies to who? To Messiah. Yet if today you take these scriptures to modern Judaism, they will tell you that the one who it's speaking about is not the Messiah, but who? Anybody want to guess? Israel. So there are 2 options on the table. Does this prayers apply to Israel or apply to the Messiah? Well, Rashi says it's applied to the Messiah. Metzudot says it's applied to the Messiah. Let's see if it can be possibly applied to Israel. And I don't understand if it's applied to Israel. How can Israel come to the heavenlies? It is hard to comprehend this. There's a wonderful book that I believe everybody needs to have in their library called The Jewish Gospels by Daniel Borayan. Daniel Borayan is a rabbi of rabbis. And he is a leading Talmudist in the world. I want to read you something that he wrote that I think will be a great benefit for you. He said the following: from the earliest layers of interpretation and right up to modern times, some interpreters have deemed the one who is like the Son of Man as a symbol of a collective, namely faithful Israelites, at the time of the Maccabean revolt. When the book of Daniel was probably written, other interpreters have insisted that the one who is like a Son of Man is the second divine figure among the ancients of days, and not an allegorical symbol of the people of Israel. So there are two options on the table here. We found it in some of the church fathers who wrote the following, and I quote, "Have the children of Israel received the kingdom of the Most High? God forbid. Or has the people come in the clouds of heaven?" The argument is based on the literal text, and it's very much to the point. Clouds, as well as riding on or with the clouds, are a common attribute of a biblical divine appearances that is called theophanies. Theophanies is Greek word for God appearances. J.A. Emerton has made the point as well when he said, the act of coming with clouds suggests a theophany of Hashem, Yud Hey Vav Hey, appearances of God himself. If Daniel 7:13 does not refer to divine being, then it is only exception out of about 70 different passages that relate to connect God coming or God appearing in the cloud. Okay? If you want all 70 passages, I have about 35 of them. I can email it to you. You can look at each one of them. And every time that it appeared that the God coming to cloud of heaven, it is Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. It's used the word Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. In reality, Judaism did not know what to do with these verses that some have said, those verses apply to Israel. However, there is a problem because Zechariah tells us what? That the Messiah will come on what? Riding lowly upon. And what does it says here? He's coming what? It is coming with a cloud. Now, how can it be? Later this evening, I will deal with the question, how can it be? If somebody hold a position that a condition have to occur, this has not have to fulfill. Either this will be fulfilled or Zechariah will be fulfilled. Means what? What's the implication? Somebody is lying to us. So either Zechariah is lying or Daniel is lying. Are you following what I'm telling you? But the Rambam says what? All the words of the prophet. So we have to show up lowly upon a donkey, friends, and coming on the clouds of heaven. How do we know that it is the same guy? Are you ready for another wow moment of the beauty of the Hebrew language? It says in Hebrew, in Zechariah chapter 9, that he will come and he's poor, right? Ani. What's the word for poor in Hebrew? Ani. The word is ani. I'm telling you the answer. A-N-I. Ani rochev al chamor. Lowly riding upon a donkey. He's coming lowly riding upon the donkey. Ani. Here he's saying he's coming in the clouds. What's the Hebrew word for cloud? Anybody know Hebrew? Maybe it will make you want to learn Hebrew. The word in Hebrew for clouds is the word ananim. What is the root of the word ananim? Ani. The same entity appear in the clouds, and the same entity appear riding upon a donkey. Isn't that amazing? Ani is the same word. There is something. There is a method of understanding the Hebrew scripture that called Gizra Shava, equal weight. And what you do with Gizra Shava, you take in a word or a text that seems unrelated, and you are relating it paleologically by a concept, a word, a root word. That's one of the most common methods of extrapolating the Hebrew Bible used by rabbis. So the rabbis actually pulled this verse, Zechariah 9:9 and Daniel 7:13, said, it doesn't speak of Israel. It speaks of the Messiah who will come, the Ananim, which is Ani, and he's also coming lower on the donkey, which is also Ani. Look at the Hebrew, it's the exact same word. The same guy going to appear twice. Are you following this? Pretty cool stuff. But friends, if this is true, we have a bigger problem, because God says he's a jealous God. Have you seen what's going to happen in verse 14? To him will giving a dominion. To him will giving the glory, the kingdom, the people, nation, language should serve him. Didn't he tell us in the Torah that there is no other God? Either Daniel is a liar or Moses is a liar. We're having a bigger issue with this text here. How do we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the one that is the Son of Man is the Messiah? I would like to give you a few insights to these incredible verses. Look with me at the very first thing that it says here. It's important. This is something, again, everything I teach you today is not something I came up with. I'm not that smart. I am just telling you what the rabbis have told us already. I just pulled it all together to present it to you. The rabbis, in this case it's Rabbi Schwartz, okay? He was troubled. Why? And again, we have to kind of look at put a magnifying glass for a moment. It says here in Hebrew, and you know, Yeshua told us something interesting. Yeshua told us to pay attention to every jot and every tittle. And we have to pay attention to the small words in the Hebrew language. So look at what's happening here. It says that behold, there was a one came with the cloud of heaven. He come like unto a son of man, and he came even to the Ancient of Days. The words I want you to focus on, or Rabbi Schwartz wants us to focus on, is the word to the Ancients of Days. The word actually, it's not the best translation, to the Ancient of Days. The word there in Hebrew is the Ad Atik Yomiyah, which literally translates as up to the Ancient of Days. The Son of Man is coming up to the Ancient of Days. The key words there are the word up to. The term up to speak of the spiritual level of the Son of Man. Okay? He is saying that the Son of Man is in the same level as the Ancient of Days. That's why he said ad atik. You mean the word ad is important. Ad is up to. Rabbi Schwartz says it this way. The Son of Man comes to the clouds of heaven all the way to the Ancient of Days. The Hebrew word ad atik yamin, or ad atik yumiyah, suggests that the Son of Man will reach the highest spiritual level. Now listen to the big shock here, which we can't even understand or speak about. He, the Son of Man, I mean, you never hear Jewish people talk like this. He will represent the ultimate revelation of God. Who is he? He is the King Messiah. He is saying the reason, because remember, he is appearing in the clouds and he's going up, and all the people is going to see him. He is the revelation of God in the physical. Well, it's blow out of the socket what Maimonides told us, that God will never take a form of a man. Rabbi Schwartz says he absolutely will take a form of a man. And not only that, he's coming up to the Ancient of Days. It is a shocker. In terms of revelation in our world, seeing the Son of Man equivalent to seeing the Ancient of Days, which is God the Father. Rabbi Chaim Kramer wrote an amazing book. And Rabbi Chaim Kramer is not a regular rabbi. You know, you can have Rabbi so-and-so. Rabbi Chaim Kramer is one of the leading Breslov rabbis in the world. He was commissioned to take some of Rabbi Nachman, and if you don't know who Rabbi Nachman of Breslov is, just go to Uman in Ukraine. And there are hundreds of thousands of Jewish people go to pray there in his burial cave who believe that he was the Messiah. And he says the following: the connection between the Messiah and the Atik. Now, the word Atik, just make yourself a note, is the Ancient of Days. Okay? The connection between the Messiah and the Ancient of Days is learned from Daniel's vision. Look at this, incredible. The Ancient include all time and space. This is really hard to understand. God, what he's saying, God is infinite. There is no time with God. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Anybody have a problem with this? Yet it transcended all. The soul of the Messiah, who is called the Son of Man, because he's coming up to the Ancient of Days, reside within Yud Hey Vav Hey. His neshama, his being is Yud Hey Vav Hey. This is one of the greatest minds of the Breslev movement. And from it, this level, that all of his powers are drawn. And since it transcends time and it transcends space, Messiah can transcend every transgression ever committed and resolve it. It is inconceivable what he's telling us. He's telling us here that the reason he's coming, I always think about a picture. Here's the picture that you can think about. A beast. In the beast, you have the queen, right? And all the workers coming back to draw all their powers back from this thing. I always think about this movie, the Star Trek movie, where they have the Borgs. Remember the Borgs? And you have the Master Borg. The Master Borg is the one who's called Ancient of Days. And he is the infinite thing. And it says the Messiah is the only one who can come back to there and to receive all the powers, all the authority, that he can become a time traveler. And transcend the sins at the beginning of humanity. Remember last time that we met, last couple of months ago, we talked about one of the name of the Messiah. One of his name was the name of the Poretz, the breaker. Do you recall that? Well, notice that the term Poretz, the breaker, Genesis 38:29, is actually used in conjunction with the word, if you go to read the genealogy of King David, if you go to the book of Fruit, chapter 4, verse 17. And it starts with the word, here are the generations. And then it gives you all the generation of Peretz. It starts with the breaker all the way to David. But notice something there about the word generation. The word generation in this context, okay, used also at the beginning of creation. Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. The same word. Here are the generation of the heaven and the earth. Okay? Look with me. Generation, Torah, Genesis. 2, 4. Notice how the word generation spelled. Again, you're not going to see it in your English Bible, but I will tell you that the word generation is spelled perfectly. Taf, Vav, Lamed, Daled. Excuse me. Taf, Vav, yeah. Taf, Vav, Lamed, Daled, Vav, Taf. Both Vavs are there. The rest of the Bible, all the Vavs are always missing. They are missing. They are completely missing. When you come to the book of Ruth, and you see again here the generation of Peretz who begotten Chetzron, give you Messiah, the Toldot is again spelled correctly. It's spelled correctly only in the book of Genesis and then in the book of Ruth, representing the first coming and representing the second coming. It's representing the both coming. Why this is significant? Because Messiah, the rabbis tell us, is going to come back to return us to the first Toldot. What was in Genesis 2:4? Think about it in the context of what we read. There was no sin in the world. The world was in perfect harmony. Adam and Eve have not sinned. The Messiah is going to transcend all time and restore the world back to his perfect and ideal condition again. Tell me, what human being can do that? He is going to take back the world to Genesis 1:1 and to extend the world to the perfect condition. This is amazing. Rabbi Kramer continues and says, the Messiah spirit stem from the nose. Remember yesterday I told you that he will judge by what? Pay attention to this. This is important. Of the Arich Anafin. Remember yesterday I told you that Judaism have a lot of similar concepts to Christianity. They just call them different things. Arich Anafin is one of those concepts, and we're going to touch on that extensively here in about 15 minutes. But Arich Anafin is the name in Aramaic that God actually used in the Hebrew Bible. In Exodus, he says, Moses asked him, who are you? Remember we look at those 13 attributes? And he says, I am Adonai, Adonai, I'm Arich Apayim. Arich Anafim, Aroch Apayim. That's the term that's used in the Hebrew Bible, okay, to represent Yudei Vavei. And what Rabbi Kramer here is telling us in common language, that all the power of the Messiah are driving from the Keter, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, is where he sucked all of his powers from. He is fully receive everything from Yud, 5a, the level of the Keter. What's the Keter? Is the Father. Arich Anapin is rooted in the Ancient of Day, Yudei Vavei. Messiah is rooted in the exalted level of the crown, since it transcends all levels known to us. We have no concept of who the Messiah really is. In essence, what he's saying in pure English, if I can count it, because very esoteric language, is saying that the Messiah and the Keter, which is what you call God the Father, are really one in the same. They are really one in the same. And therefore, whatever, that's the reason it can transcend time. Because it's timeless. Somebody asked me yesterday the question when he was born. Yeshua was born with Miriam. But you have to understand the spirit of the Messiah was there in Genesis 1:1. It says that. And the Spirit of the Lord moving over the water. We looked at that yesterday. Vayatza choter migeza ishai. There is a difference. It says, a come forth, a shoot out of the rod of Jesse, right? The word came forth, vayatza, is not the same word as used in Bereshit, vanivra, and created. You see, when something's springing out, is not something that is being created. There is a difference between something springing out and something that is created out. The Messiah was not created. He was there from the beginning of the time. He transcends all time. Are you following what I'm telling you? Anybody that have a problem with this have a problem with Daniel, not with us. But the text continue on to give us amazing, absolutely amazing revelation. In the next verse, let's go back and read it. By the way, are you with me? Does anybody need a break? It's okay if you need a break. Who need a break?